What's up guys, this is Heat, and in this video we're going to take a look at a summoner build which revolves around the unique belt Umbilicus Immortalis. If you don't know, this belt is pretty insane mechanically because it gives all FLASK buffs and properties to your zombies and specters instead of the player. So essentially you get no FLASK defense, which when you think about it is pretty crazy. FLASK plays such an integral role defensively that it's hard to imagine being able to play without them. I've wanted this particular mechanic for summoners for a while now, but wasn't expecting it to be released with such an enormous downside. Most people I've talked to have said no way is it possible to make a viable build around this belt because of the downside, but I had been theorizing build potential throughout the Parandus League and wanted to prove it could work. The Parandus Hardcore 2-week flashback was my last chance in having easy access to creating this build, and what you're seeing here is the result. But okay, here's the deal. This isn't exactly going to be a build guide per se, but rather a demonstration of a summoner build utilizing the Umbilicus Immortalis, and commentary on how I was able to make this work. It's more of an exploration or build study science on build possibilities and viability, and maybe the implications of mechanics that act outside of normal parameters. The build is low life based and was rushed for the purpose of Path of Exile build science. That being said, I transitioned extremely early into low life at around level 82 and had a small ES pool of about 6,500 because of the super early transition and the lack of proper items existing in the league. This resulted in a rip at level 85. My first thought was this build can't be life based because of the life FLASK limitation, so it had to be ES based. And if that was the case, then it should be low life so I can squeeze as much defense out of auras as I can to compensate for the lack of flasks. That being said, I had to run with a Shav's chest piece and a Prism Guardian shield to maximize my auras. I was able to run 6 auras, all 3 purities, vitality, discipline, and haste. I also experimented with switching out haste for Arctic armor for even more defense. The question becomes, what do you do when you take damage and need to refill your ES or life pool? Here's how I covered for this essential mechanic. I opted to go Zealot's Oath, used a Vitality Aura, a Stone Golem, a Rejuvenation Totem situationally, and a Sulfur Flask that provides Consecrate Ground, which is a life regen mechanic. When everything is active, I get about 850 ES regen at approximately 6500 ES, so that's pretty good. I also used Vol Discipline as a quick regen and boost in ES for moments when you really need to heal fast. So let's talk about flasks. Because of the lack of defense, I wanted to use flasks that provided a lot of defense utility, so that's why I opted for Stibnite, Sulfur, and Aquamarine flasks. With these flasks, I could spread blind and chilled ground to enemies, reducing the likelihood of taking damage. I ran an Eternal Life flask for instances where minions needed even more life regen. The only offensive flask I ran was a Silver Flask, but there are a lot of possibilities and combinations available. For example, at one point I considered having my minions be crit braced and running a Diamond Flask with Deodra's Elixir, or even block shenanigans with Rumi's Concoction and Bone Offering. Something I planned for but didn't get an opportunity to incorporate because I lacked levels was a Curse on Hit dual curse setup with Ball Lightning proccing Temp Chains and Enfeeble. With this setup I would have picked up Elemental Equilibrium to further increase the damage of the minions. The skill tree is pretty standard and should be familiar to classic-based summoners who focus on low life. A lot of aura nodes, all-important minion passives. I chose a Witch Necromancer because I was half competing for the Demi, but you could also experiment with the Templar Guardian class. The most important items in this build are Shavron's Chest, Prism Guardian Shield, Midnight Bargain, Bones of Ulor, and the Umbilicus Immortalis, with most other items focusing on increasing ES. How viable is this build? In solo play it clears slow, so if you're concerned with clear speed, this isn't a good choice. It's suited for party play and plays more like a support build because of the auras and the utility from flask usage. So I think it's really strong and unique as a support build and probably fully realized as a build around level 93 or 94. I was successful in getting the build to work, but I still feel like the downside is too substantial. A lot of FLASK use is situational, reactive, and anticipatory, meaning pre-potting. And you don't realize how often the game creates situations where the player needs FLASK to prevent not even damage, but death until you don't have access to these flasks. The most important aspect of Umbilicus Immortalis is it forces you to think differently about defenses as a summoner. How do you utilize on-screen defenses like Chilled Ground and Smoke Cloud? How and when do you spread it? And what sort of utility does Convocation plus all FLASK provide? Umbilicus Immortalis introduces the freshest summoner mechanic I've seen from GGG in a long time. I would recommend trying it if you're a summoner fan solely on the basis of experimenting with build possibilities. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.